Hello and welcome to Between Sets with Church. Today we welcome Raven from Digging Roots. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Miigwech.
Sorry for interrupting your sound check and everything, but I'm so glad we were finally able to get this done.
Yeah, amazing, perfect.
So before we get into it, we have to talk about the recent happenings at the Junos. You guys came home with some award?
Yeah, we got a piece of hardware, which is super fantastic.
Nice.
It's our second one, and but it's the first one for our son.
Oh.
And our son is our drummer, and he played a seminal role in the way that the music sounds, in the way that the songs became what they became. Like, without him there, the album would have been totally different. Yeah, so it was super exciting to have him present and to have him be such a creative part of the album.
Yeah, cool. I was going to say too, because even listening to the album and even a lot of the previous stuff too, there's so many worldly influence. You know, I've heard everything from hip hop, country, rock. There's a little bit of everything. Did your son actually add a little bit more to what you were already doing?
Well, he definitely grew up in that environment. So, you know, listening from everything to Bob Marley to Miles Davis and Coltrane and Eric Dolphy and, I don't know, ABBA. Yeah. You know, it was just everything was diverse, thrown in there. And I think that he just had all those rhythms in him. And we bring a lot of power rhythms in our music as well. So all of that is sort of blended. And I mean, that's what kind of makes it of the time today.
Mm-hmm, yeah. It's been 5 years since you guys have been back in Barrie. I think somewhere around there.
I think so. Like, we haven't really played in Barrie all that often.
Yeah.
Like, we've lived here for, I think this is going on our 22nd year. And I think we probably only played here like 3 or maybe 4 times.
Yeah, and I think the last time I saw, I think was here actually. I think there was was it a fundraiser or something? There was something going on. Yeah. Do you enjoy playing back in town?
Yeah, it's easy. I don't have to travel anywhere.
Yeah,
except for my doorstep.
Yeah, you got a couple blocks and you're home. Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So recently, you guys had a little mini tour. You were in. You had played Aurelia, Gravenhurst, Barrie, and Owen Sound. I think was it last night. Yeah, how's that little leg of the tour going?
It was really great. What I really enjoyed about it was there's all these little theaters in the small communities, and I was just amazed at how great they sound and how just important they are for our communities. Because at the end of the day, the way I see music is that it brings a magic to the community. It plays a pivotal role in the way that culture exhales and inhales in our community. It's a live thing. Like, music is something that lives and breathes, and it brings culture to our communities. So having these really beautiful spaces is really wonderful. I think the real key is to bring modern musicians and to bring people who are working in music and people that are playing original music. The more that we can get the community out, the more support there'll be for musicians. You go to like places like Cuba, for instance, and like when I go there, I just bring my little guitar or even a ukulele, and I can walk on the streets, and everybody there can sing in tune. It's amazing. They really can. And then, you know, like a lot of musicians know how common people know how to play like a piano or like a stringed instrument. There's just like a real musical culture embedded within that society. And by the same token, if you go to a place like different countries in Europe and you play jazz music as a jazz musician, you could actually still make a living there doing that. So I really like how some cultures really bring music in, and when they do, it also spawns other things culturally, like food and dance, and all these things become richer as a result. So I really see music as this tool to bring the good life, which is what we call Bamadzuin, to the communities.
Okay, yeah, okay, cool. I was going to say too, a lot of those small towns you had mentioned, also the buildings themselves. You're saying how great the sound was. I think a lot of that has to do with like the whole vibe of the buildings. You know, the historic vibe. Who's played there before? Because a lot of the old jazz and blues artists used to play up in this area quite a few years ago as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that a building almost becomes alive when you have all this energy that's been passing through, and I think that's what makes it important as well, is that when the community is invested in something, then it's almost like there's a shadow that remains. And I don't know if you believe in ghosts or not, but sometimes there's a little bit of a spirit that's left over from the last person and the last person before that, and then all of a sudden the room starts to get tuned up and sounds good every single time, and you're like, I don't know, we haven't changed the PA system, but it sounds good. So there's lots of things that happen, and like we played Massey Hall recently, and they did all these renovations, but there's always a vibe there whenever you play there. And we played there twice this year so far. And it's just, there is a vibe. And I think it's because when we all put energy in some place, that energy kind of continues.
Yeah,
so
that's what
I don't know how to explain it.
No, I think it's the energy. That's exactly what it is. I know the answer to this. I've investigated, researched a little bit, but you have a really interesting name to, the history of the title of the band and how you got the name Digging Roots. Do you mind explaining to us a little bit more about how the name came about? I think it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, great. Essentially, Digging Roots came about when Shoshona and I first met each other, and we didn't form Digging Roots right away because I was having hand issues. I couldn't play music for 7 years. I couldn't pick up a mug of coffee. It was just like I was in so much pain. And
did they say what it was? What were you?
Well, the doctor said that it was carpal tunnel and tendonitis, and it showed the signs of it, but there were these other pains that were happening that they couldn't figure it out. And they said, well, we can do this one operation where we cut you here and we pull out all these tendons. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do that.
No.
And I had talked to a bunch of other musicians who did that, and they just lost strength in their hands and couldn't really play the same way again. But I had seen about 30 doctors and specialists, and gone for CAT scans. I did all these alternate therapies. I tried everything. And I was living in Boston at the time, going to school, and I had to stop playing music, but I started writing for a big band, and I had like 30 instruments, and I was just writing on notation paper and making these arrangements, and living in a completely different world of music. It was a great experience doing that, but ultimately I wanted to do what Digging Roots is doing, which is to play music that comes from who we are and tell these stories and embed them in the music. And so I started working with elders, and I started working with youth and empowerment and identity, and really got those two age groups together to share. And it was really fulfilling work for me in my heart. But creatively, I was like climbing the walls and really wanting to play music. So finally, I went to Shoshona's Res, and I saw an Anishinaabe medicine person, and this person looked at me and said, okay, you know what, you'll be fine in a month. And I was like, really? I was like, I've been on this healing journey for like 7 years. And he said, no, I know what's wrong with you. I can see it in your body. And what we're going to do is we're going to go out for a medicine walk. And I said, let's do it. And, I wasn't sure because, like, it'd been such a long time that I'd been dreaming about being normal again. And, I was excited, but I didn't want to get overly excited because I didn't want to get my hopes entirely up. But I was like, okay, let's go for this walk. He said, just bring a backpack. So I showed up the next day with a backpack. He had a shovel for me, and then we started walking in the bush. And he started talking about all the Anishinaabe names for all the mitig, like all the trees. And he said that these trees, as big as they are up here, imagine how big they are in the bottom. They reach deep into the earth. And he said that, you know, like this pine tree here, this pine grove, for instance, he said that the reason why these little tiny pine trees on the bottom can grow is not because they're getting sunlight, because no sunlight's shining on them, so they would die. What's happening is those bigger trees are getting the nutrients from the sun, and inside their roots, they're passing those nutrients to the little ones, and they're helping them grow in the shadows, and one day they'll reach the sun themselves. So he said that there's a whole network of communication with all of the trees, all of the shrubs, all of the plants. They all communicate, and they do it through electricity with their roots, but they also do it through fungus. And he was talking about all this type of thing, and this was like years ago now. And now people talk about what they call the wood wide web of this interconnected, network underneath the ground. Mm-hmm. So he was talking about this, and he said that we're going to pick these medicine plants, and here's the shovel. So I dug the first one that he said I should have, and he said that you have to talk to this plant because everything is living around us. And because everything is living, we have to respect that. You're digging this plant up, and you're taking its life, so you have to give a gift. So he said you have some sema, which is tobacco. It's one of our medicines. And he said you have to make an offering that you're putting down this tobacco, this sema for this plant, and you're going to tell it that I'm going to take your life, but your life is going to go inside of me, and then you're going to do good things with this life energy that you're taking in. And then, you know, it's an exchange. And so I did this for a whole bunch of plants, and finally the last one, the medicine person was like, Raven, you see those cattails there in the swamp? And I was like, yeah. You see the plant next to the cattails? And I was like, yeah. And he said, that's the one, you gotta go dig it up. And I was like, oh no, really? So I found myself waist deep in this swamp, and like picking up this this mashkiki, this medicine, and I came out, and I had all these roots and all these plants, and he showed me how to clean them, how to take care of them, and then he said that I have to brew a tea with them for a whole month, and I would have a mug of tea in the morning and a mug of tea before bedtime. And after the first week of having this, I was like, wow, I could pick up a guitar again and play a bit. And then after 2 weeks, I was like, I'm not in pain. And then I was like, ooh, my hopes were really getting high. And then after a month, I was completely back to normal.
Wow.
And it was a 7-year journey. And then that's when we started digging roots, and that's where that connection came from. But digging roots also, you know, besides digging those roots, it also means going back to where we come from and going back into those traditions of traditional knowledge and the stories of who we are, and the concept and the ontological thinking behind who we are as Anishinaabe and Ongwehongwe and Indigenous people are all sort of embedded in those songs. And it was kind of like a rebirth where I got to have this second opportunity to come to music. So I don't take anything for granted, and I really appreciate having the gift of being able to play music.
Yeah, that's a great story. It is. It really is. It's awesome. Yeah, we're going to cut to the video that you did for Skoda.
Skoden.
Yeah, Skoden. Sorry. Yeah. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about the lyrics behind that?
Sure. So Skoden, I guess, it's a colloquialism. It's kind of like a niche patois. Like in the communities, you know, we have all these accents that are mixed with an indigenous language with some colonial language, and so we come up with all these slang words all the time. So Skoden actually means let's go then.
Oh, cool.
So it's like Skoden.
That's cool.
The premise behind this was just before the pandemic, my youngest son and his age group of friends were hanging out at our house a lot, and we started having discussions, and we started talking about global warming and the changes that are happening, and that age group is really concerned with the happenings of the earth right now. And there was all this stuff going on saying, we have like 12 years left until there's no turning back. The caps are melting. Since 1976, they've been doing this study, and they've estimated as best as they can that, over 70% of the oceans have been lost. Like the species of 70% are gone. We don't know what the long-term side effects to that are, and essentially my son and his cohorts of that generation said, hey Dad, this is what you've left us. So being a father, I wanted to be an optimistic father and try and find solutions, and we had all these discussions and talks. And I'm not a video game player, but during that time there was this video game called Call of Duty that came out, and I don't know, it was the latest greatest shoot 'em up game, and it was out for, I don't know, like a few months, 6 months or something. But they took these findings of when the game came out, and I think it was like 3 or 4 months, everybody in the world got online and played this shoot 'em up game where they were just killing each other and massacring each other, and a total game of war. And they were all connected to this, internet cloud somewhere where they were creating all this war. And they estimated those 3 or 4 months of time in human time on how many people joined that network and how many people put in their time, and they estimated it was like over 125 million years of time, of human time, where people were just killing and shooting up each other. And so we were saying, oh, well, imagine if they made this video game where they started cleaning up the oceans, and they had these robots, and before you went to school in the morning, you just like played the video game and picked up a few cans and a few of this and that, and everybody everywhere started to contribute. And the way that we think about things, if we could just not turn it 360 but just shift it ever so slightly in the way that we're thinking about each other and the way that we're thinking about the earth, that we can make things simpatico so that we can actually be here longer and live in a more harmonious way. And so that's what this song is about. It's an environmental song, and it's really about, if you're not willing to step up to what needs to be done, then you should step aside and let the other people come and do that work. And I really believe in those younger generations, because we need that right now.
Yeah.
Like, I've traveled up to Iqaluit, to the northern tip of Norway with the Sami people, and there's massive changes that are happening in the Arctic right now, where the ice is melting, and there's just some crazy things, and that's where you see a lot of the changes are up north first, but even down here with the earthquakes and with the hurricanes and things like that, like where tornadoes, like
so much going on, one after another.
Exactly. So we need to get ourselves together.
Yeah, it's almost sad when the Weather Channel becomes part of your regular programming, because you don't know what's happening.
Exactly,
next.
And that's where Skoden comes in. Like, let's Skoden.
I like it. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
You can't slow down, can't sit still. Can I get some peace of mind? You can't slow down, can't sit still. Can I get some peace of mind? Ever made a change was to be brave and unrestrained, leading with our hearts, not with our brains. Fear will be our courage now, hope will be our strength. Can't slow down, can't sit still. Can I get some peace of mind? Stand up, step up, or get out of the way. Sit down if you got nothing to say. We've gotta move, baby, move, baby, move, baby, move. Stand up, step up, or get out of the way. Can't understand. It's irrefutable. It carries on. Business as usual. 11 years to change the course. 3,600 days. If we're not working it, then we're in the way. Stand up, step up, or get out of the way. Sit down if you got nothing to say. We've gotta move, baby, move, baby, move, baby, move. Stand up, step up, or get out of the way. Lost generations living in fear. Failed machine with broken ears. Why put up with this for all these years? Speak up your truth now for all to hear. Stand up, step up, or get out of the way. Sit down if you got nothing to say. We gotta move, baby, move, baby. Small revolutions, baby. Stand up, stolen, or get out of the way. Move, baby, move, baby. Small revolutions, baby. Move, baby, move, baby. Too much to lose now, love. We can't move, listen. We gotta move now, listen. Move, baby, move. Too much to lose, too much to lose now, love. Can't slow down, we can't sit still. Can I get some peace of mind? Can't slow down, can't sit still. Can I get some peace of mind?
Coming out of the gates of what we've gone through the last couple of years, how was it transitioning back into playing live again? Was it a little rough at first, or did you guys?
It was rough in the sense that people, small numbers came to watch music, and they were scared, and rightly so, because there was so much media about, like, we're all gonna die. That's it. It's the end of the road.
Yeah, pretty morbid. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that people were really careful. Prior to that, people were dancing and, like, just moving and socializing. So there was almost this, like, baby steps into audiences becoming comfortable again. And last year, we left Barrie in June and didn't really come home until a few days before Christmas. We were kind of just gone all the time. We had toured across Canada, then we toured around in the States from California to New Mexico to Nashville up that way, and then we had gone to South Africa, and then to Europe, and then we came back and went across the country another couple of times, and then all of a sudden it was a few days before Christmas, and watching how audiences shifted from June to December was really, really cool. I actually wish we had a camera crew just to show, like, from A to B.
Yeah, that would be
transition.
Cool. Yeah. Speaking of like travel and international, how do you find different countries? How do they, or do they kind of know the history of Canada and understand sort of what we've been going through for the last several hundred years and what's going on fairly recently? Do you think maybe they have more of a better perspective on things than we do? I've heard that several times, that several European countries know a little bit more of our history than some Canadians do.
I feel that it's totally dependent on the place, and it depends on the region too. Like, for instance, in Australia, all the indigenous people there know quite a bit of history of what's happening here too, because it's uncanny in the sense that it's so similar. Like residential schools, stolen generation, the type of colonialism, the type of genocide, all of those things, it's almost like a carbon copy. And a different climate, obviously, but I think it's part of this commonwealth of colonialism. And when you go to Europe, it depends. Like you can go to the south of France, and some people might know. And when you're in Paris, people are a little bit more open-minded. When we were in certain parts of Germany, there's a fetish surrounding the Indian because of this Karl May, who wrote a whole bunch of books and just made up stories about Native Americans. And what ended up happening is that people just ate that up culturally, but he had never come to North America when he wrote those books, so he just kind of made this Hollywood dream of what he thought the Indian was. Yeah. So it really depends. Like when we were in South Africa, most people didn't know the history that exists between Canada and South Africa. And the history there, and I grew up knowing this because, one, I'm an Indigenous person, but we learned about this on the res because we had our own curriculum. And essentially, in the 1940s, the Canadian government hosted a bunch of Afrikaners and brought them to Canada, and they traveled all across the country, and they studied the reserve system and how to take care of the so-called Indian problem. And so they studied residential schools, the reserve system, and the RCMP, how they were dealing with Indigenous people. And then those South Afrikaners then went back, and that's when they implemented apartheid.
Yeah.
So, there's this deep history, and people didn't know that. So there was like a lot of great education and exchanges and conversation, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and what we really want is to communicate with each other.
That's right. Yeah.
It's better if we understand history and don't repeat those cycles of history.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Time just flew by, didn't it?
Yeah, no kidding.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. Have a great show.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Take
right
care.
on. Okay.